Forget the glitz and glamour you thought you knew. Hollywood's golden age wasn't just about sparkling stars and timeless elegance, it was a wild, unforgiving beast. Beneath the dazzling lights and flawless smiles lay secrets darker than you could imagine. Addiction, scandal, and danger weren't just whispers. They were the pulse of the industry. These are the stories of 15 actors who didn't just break hearts. They broke boundaries, shattered lives, and even defied the law. Some survived to tell their own tales, while others were swallowed whole by the chaos they created. Yet, every one of them left behind a legacy so shocking that it still echoes through Tinseltown. Brace yourself, because after this, you'll never see Hollywood in the same light again. Errol Flynn, the devil in the velvet coat. Errol Flynn wasn't just a movie star, he was a living tempest wrapped in elegance and danger. With a jawline sharp enough to cut glass, a voice that could melt resolve, and a roguish charm that defied Hollywood's prim standards, Flynn became the embodiment of the swashbuckling hero. Yet his off-screen life was a whirlwind far more scandalous and chaotic than any role he ever played. By the early 1940s, Flynn's legend of adventure and daring had begun to blur with his real-life exploits. As tales of his lavish parties and scandalous liaisons splashed across newspapers, his dashing image took a hit. The press painted him not as the fearless hero, but as a hedonistic rebel, an icon tarnished by whispers of reckless indulgence. He famously quipped, "I like old whiskey and young women," and his mansion, rumored to contain hidden rooms and secret corridors, became synonymous with the wildest parties in town. But it wasn't just excess and decadence that cast shadows over Flynn's legacy. During World War II, rumors swirled of his alleged involvement with foreign powers and questionable dealings, speculations that only deepened the air of mystery around him. Though much remained unproven, the damage to his reputation was palpable. Years of living on the edge eventually took their toll. Flynn's health crumbled under the weight of his own lifestyle, and he died at just 50 years old. His life story remains a compelling paradox, a dazzling icon of cinematic adventure who became a cautionary tale of fame's darker temptations. The devil in the velvet coat, a man whose charisma lit up the screen, but whose private storm consumed him in the end. Charlie Chaplan, the genius, the clown, and the darkness behind the lights. Charlie Chaplan was more than just an actor. He was a living legend. With his iconic bowler hat, tiny mustache, and unmistakable shuffle, Chaplan became the heart and soul of the silent film era, turning comedy into art and making millions laugh through the toughest of times. Yet, behind the lovable little tramp persona lay a man of deep contradictions and scandalous controversies that would forever shadow his legacy. At the height of his fame, Chaplan's personal life began to unravel in a way that shocked Hollywood. At just 35 years old, he married Lita Gray, a mere 16-year-old, a union that quickly spiraled into chaos. Their tumultuous relationship soon became a public spectacle, marred by allegations of emotional manipulation and control. As if that wasn't enough, Chaplan found himself entangled in a scandal involving actress Joan Barry, who took him to court claiming he was the father of her child. Despite DNA tests proving otherwise, the court inexplicably ordered Chaplan to pay child support, a decision that sent the media into a frenzy and left his once glittering reputation stained. But Chaplan's troubles didn't end there. As the political climate in America shifted, Chaplan found himself on the wrong side of public sentiment. Accused of harboring leftist views during the height of the Red Scare, his loyalty to the United States was questioned. In 1952, when he traveled to Europe, he was suddenly barred from returning to the country he had called home for decades. Despite his enormous contributions to American cinema, Chaplan had never been granted U.S. citizenship, a fact that made his exile all the more poignant. "I am just one thing, a clown," Chaplan once said. But behind the laughter and the genius was a complex, controversial figure whose life off-screen was anything but a comedy. Robert Mitchum, Hollywood's unapologetic rebel. Robert Mitchum didn't just play the rebel on screen, he embodied it in real life. While most stars worked hard to hide their dark sides, Mitchum wore his like a badge of honor. With his rugged good looks, husky voice, and devil-may-care attitude, Mitchum wasn't just pretending to be Hollywood's bad boy, he lived it. In 1948, when he was busted at a Hollywood party for drug possession, The scandal should have ended his career. But Mitchum's reaction stunned everyone. Unfazed and almost amused, he shrugged it off, saying, "It's like getting arrested for holding a beer can." That nonchalant attitude didn't just save his reputation, it cemented it. A brief stint behind bars didn't taint his image, it only fueled his mystique. Suddenly, danger didn't make Mitchum undesirable, it made him iconic. Hollywood soon learned that Mitchum's wild spirit wasn't just for the cameras. Tales of his bar brawls, heated clashes with directors, and outright defiance of scripts became legendary. Rules seemed to suffocate him, but audiences couldn't get enough. Once, when a reporter pressed him on how he differed from his notorious anti-hero characters, Mitchum gave his signature smirk and quipped, "I don't shoot people." It was classic Mitchum, brutally honest and endlessly captivating. In an era when stars polished their images to perfection, Mitchum moved like a wild wind, unpredictable, reckless, and undeniably magnetic. No matter how many rules he broke, Hollywood couldn't resist his raw, unapologetic charm. Robert Mitchum didn't just survive the scandals. He thrived on them, proving that sometimes being a little dangerous makes you unforgettable. Marlon Brando, the rebel genius whose soul burned like a firestorm. Marlon Brando didn't just act, he erupted onto the screen like a living earthquake, shattering the boundaries between performance and reality. In A Streetcar Named Desire, his presence was a force of nature, raw and untamed, leaving audiences breathless and questioning where the man ended and the character began. Brando wasn't merely an actor, he was a phenomenon. A volcano of talent and emotion, unpredictable and magnetic. But like all forces of nature, his brilliance carried storms of its own. Behind the iconic roles and groundbreaking performances was a man in perpetual turmoil. Brando's personal life was as explosive as his craft, volatile relationships that blurred the lines of love and gender, a temper that could ignite in an instant, and a haunting guilt that lingered long after the lights dimmed. He once confessed, "I'm not sure if the real me survives the fame," a hint at the inner chaos that fame only fueled. The weight of tragedy seemed to cling to Brando like a second skin. Losses within his family left unhealed wounds, and his battle with self-doubt seeped into his roles, making every performance a raw, almost painful display of human frailty. He rebelled against the Hollywood machine, challenging norms and expectations, even rejecting the Oscar for The Godfather to protest political injustice. His co-stars painted a portrait of a man on fire, brilliant one moment, cold and detached the next. Marlon Brando lived as if at war with himself, his talent a gift and a curse, his spirit relentless and defiant. And that's why audiences couldn't look away, because behind every iconic role, behind the enigmatic mask, was a soul ablaze, battling to be seen and understood. Clark Gable, the king of Hollywood with secrets buried in silence. Clark Gable, the man with that irresistible smile, a poised elegance, and eyes that could make anyone weak in the knees, was undeniably the king of classic Hollywood. To the world, he was the epitome of masculine charm, the beloved Rhett Butler of Gone with the Wind. Yet behind that dazzling facade lay a tangled web of secrets that the studios fought desperately to keep buried. One of the most whispered about stories involved his co-star Loretta Young during the filming of Call of the Wild. For decades, Hollywood maintained a veil of silence around the incident, but eventually, Loretta revealed the heartbreaking truth. During filming, she became pregnant under highly sensitive and controversial circumstances. Knowing that such a scandal could obliterate both their careers, the studio took swift, ruthless action. Loretta vanished from the public eye for months, only to return and publicly adopt her own child, a cruel charade orchestrated to protect Gable's image and preserve his reign as Hollywood royalty. But this wasn't the only time Gable's reputation needed safeguarding. Known for his tangled love affairs, many involving married women, his personal life became a constant risk to his star power. MGM, the powerhouse studio behind his fame, acted as his protector, cleaning up messes and keeping stories from leaking. An insider once confessed, "Just keep the press happy and the police away, that's enough." Despite these efforts, whispers still circulated. Even his closest friends, legendary stars like Katharine Hepburn, supposedly wanted to speak out, but the overwhelming force of Hollywood power kept them silent. To the adoring public, Gable was always the confident, dashing hero. But those who knew him saw the complicated, scarred man who lived under the weight of his own myth. Fame couldn't hide the flaws, and secrets, no matter how deeply buried, have a way of clawing their way to the surface. Spencer Tracy, the hero on screen, the tragic enigma off it. Spencer Tracy was the epitome of classic Hollywood, cool, composed, and unwaveringly charismatic on screen. To audiences, he was the quintessential leading man, a symbol of integrity and strength. Yet behind the scenes, Tracy was a man of complex contradictions, wrestling with demons that fame couldn't silence. Off camera, Tracy lived a double life. A devout Catholic, he refused to divorce his wife, holding fast to his faith. Yet, for more than 2 decades, he maintained a deeply passionate, yet secretive, relationship with fellow Hollywood legend Katharine Hepburn. To the world, they were the best of friends, but everyone in the industry knew the truth. Their bond ran far deeper than mere companionship. But it wasn't just love that tore at Tracy's soul. He battled lifelong addictions, slipping in and out of control without warning. On set, he could be professional and magnetic, his presence commanding the screen. But when the darkness took hold, he vanished, leaving friends and colleagues to wonder when, or if he would return. One director likened working with him to walking on broken glass barefoot, never knowing whether Tracy would be gentle and insightful or impulsive and explosive. Through every chaotic episode, it was Hepburn who remained his unwavering anchor. A silent companion, she endured his turbulent moods, standing quietly in the shadows while the world adored his public persona. Studios, too, shielded him from scandal, valuing his box office draw and the trust audiences placed in him. On screen, Tracy was a moral icon, a man audiences believed in, even as his real-life struggles threatened to unravel him. In his final years, a weary Tracy reflected on the burden of living with unresolved conflicts. "I have ghosts," he admitted, "and they never leave me." In the end, the actor who played heroes was haunted by the battle between his faith, his fame, and the fractured soul he could never truly mend. John Barrymore, theater royalty and the tragic descent of a legend. John Barrymore, a name that once resonated through the grand halls of theater like a triumphant bell. Born into the illustrious Barrymore family, he was destined for greatness, carrying not only a legacy but the powerful presence and commanding voice of a true stage king. In the roaring 1920s and 30s, he was celebrated as the Prince of Hamlet, a genius whose talent lit up both Broadway and Hollywood. Yet, behind the dazzling performances was a man unraveling, one drink at a time. At first, Barrymore was the embodiment of Hollywood freedom, a charmer with a glass of fine liquor in hand, regaling high society parties with his legendary wit. But when the curtain fell, darkness crept in. Lines began to slip from his memory, punctuality became a rare occurrence, and there were nights when he vanished entirely. Friends who adored his brilliance now watched helplessly as he spiraled. Stories of wild antics replaced accolades, and the elegant parties turned into chaotic spectacles where Barrymore was both the star and the cautionary tale. Producers whispered in bitterness, "John was the only man I ever knew who could drink his legacy dry." And so it happened. His once glorious career dissolved into fleeting comedic roles, taken not for passion but to pay off mounting debts. Barrymore had lost more than just his fame. He had lost himself. When he passed away in 1942 at the age of 60, it was not just the death of a man but the end of an era. The world mourned not only the loss of a legendary actor but the tragic downfall of a king whose brilliance was devoured by his own demons. If Hollywood ever had a classic tragedy, it was the story of John Barrymore, a man who lit up the stage but could not escape his own shadow. Rosco Arbuckle, the scandal that shattered Hollywood. In the glittering world of early 1920s Hollywood, Rosco "Fatty" Arbuckle was a comedic giant, both literally and figuratively. His imposing frame and rare comedic brilliance made him one of the silent film era's most beloved stars. Audiences adored him, and the industry couldn't get enough of his magnetic charm. As a close friend of Charlie Chaplan and a mentor to Buster Keaton, Arbuckle was an icon, a symbol of Hollywood's golden age. But in a single, disastrous weekend, it all came crashing down. In 1921, after a raucous party at a luxurious San Francisco hotel, Arbuckle found himself at the center of a scandal that would destroy his career. He was accused of involvement in the tragic death of a young actress named Virginia Rapp. As news of the incident spread like wildfire, the media pounced, painting Arbuckle as a villain of unimaginable cruelty. Moral outrage swept the nation, leading to boycotts and public condemnation. Hollywood panicked. Arbuckle faced trial, not once, but 3 agonizing times. Though he was ultimately acquitted, with the final jury even issuing a rare public apology acknowledging the complete lack of evidence against him, the damage was done. The court of public opinion had already declared him guilty, and Hollywood's doors slammed shut. Studios shunned him, and his name became synonymous with disgrace. Blacklisted, Arbuckle was forced to work under an alias, his once shining career reduced to ashes. For years, he struggled to rebuild his life, taking on small roles and directing films in the shadows of his former glory. Then, in 1933, hope flickered once more. A new movie contract, the first real chance at a comeback in over a decade. But fate dealt a cruel hand. Just hours after signing the contract, Arbuckle died suddenly of a heart attack. Rosco Arbuckle's fall from grace wasn't just a personal tragedy, it was a turning point for Hollywood itself. His scandal played a pivotal role in the creation of the Hays Code, America's first formal attempt to regulate film content. Arbuckle's story is a haunting reminder that in the ruthless world of Hollywood, a single moment can snatch away a lifetime of triumph. The tragic fall of Hollywood's Superman, George Reeves and the deadly mystery. George Reeves was more than just a man in a red and blue costume. He was the embodiment of truth, justice, and the American spirit. As Superman, he soared across television screens, a beacon of hope to countless children who believed in his invincibility. But away from the spotlight, his life was tangled in darkness, chaos, and one of Hollywood's most perplexing mysteries. On June 16, 1959, the world was shocked when George Reeves was found dead in his bedroom, a gunshot wound to the head. The police quickly labeled it a suicide, but disbelief rippled through his circle of friends and fans. Those closest to him insisted George wasn't depressed. He was making future plans, discussing new projects, and even preparing to get married. It didn't add up. Adding fuel to the mystery was George's complex love life. He had been romantically involved with Toni Mannix, the wife of Eddie Mannix, a powerful MGM executive with rumored mafia ties. When George ended the relationship and started seeing a younger woman, strange and sinister things began to happen. He confided in friends that he felt watched, followed, and increasingly unsafe. He even considered abandoning Hollywood altogether. On that fateful night, guests downstairs claimed they heard gunshots, but no one checked on George until later. When the police finally arrived, something was off. The gun had no fingerprints, and there was no gunpowder residue on George's hands, clues that didn't align with a typical suicide. Speculation ran wild. Was it a crime of passion? A carefully orchestrated murder disguised as suicide? Theories swirled, pointing to jealous rage, mafia involvement, or even a staged cover-up. Yet, despite countless investigations and endless rumors, the truth remains shrouded in uncertainty. George Reeves, the man who once played Superman, a hero who inspired millions, died alone and under a cloud of suspicion. As one reporter hauntingly put it, he saved the world, but no one could save him. Rock Hudson, the secret that shook America. Rock Hudson was the epitome of Hollywood's leading man, tall, charming, romantic, the kind of star America idolized in the 1950s. Studios built entire fantasies around him, investing heavily in his image as the ultimate heartthrob. But beneath the perfectly crafted persona was a reality that Hudson was forced to conceal, a truth that could have destroyed his career in an instant. Hudson was gay, a secret that didn't fit the script Hollywood had written for him. The industry demanded perfection, and in that perfection, there was no room for his truth. To maintain the illusion, studio executives orchestrated a sham marriage and strictly controlled his public appearances, ensuring that no whisper of scandal could tarnish their prized leading man. Hudson once admitted to a close friend, I just want to be loved, but I have to pretend to be someone else my whole life to survive. It was a confession that revealed the weight of his double life, living in fear, surrounded by people who couldn't fully know him. Even those closest to Hudson had to live in the shadows with him. No public acknowledgement, no open affection, no chance to be seen for who he truly was. It was a life wrapped in secrecy, suffocating under the pressure of expectation. But in 1985, the truth shattered the facade. Rock Hudson became the first major celebrity to publicly announce that he had AIDS, a brave declaration that left the world reeling. At a time when the disease was shrouded in fear, stigma, and misunderstanding, Hudson's admission sparked a national conversation. Fans were stunned, some felt betrayed, others admired his courage, but no one could deny the power of that moment. Just a few months later, Hudson passed away, but his legacy endured far beyond his films. His final act, choosing to live openly in his last days, broke down barriers, forcing America to confront its prejudices about AIDS and homosexuality. Rock Hudson spent his life playing the role of an icon, but it was his final, most authentic performance, being himself, that ultimately changed the world. Tab Hunter, the star who lived a double life. Tab Hunter was the embodiment of the 1950s American dream, a golden-haired, chiseled icon with a dazzling smile that could light up any movie screen. He was Hollywood's idea of perfection, the clean-cut leading man that adorned countless posters and magazines. But behind that flawless image was a man living in constant fear. Fear that the truth about his identity would destroy everything he had built. Hunter was gay in an era when coming out wasn't just career suicide, it was social exile. The studio system that had crafted his fame also ensnared him in a web of deception. To protect their investment, executives orchestrated his public life like a carefully written script. Fake dates with glamorous starlets were arranged, paparazzi photos were staged, and PR teams toiled endlessly to crush any whispers of his true self. The pressure was suffocating. One night, Hunter was arrested at a gay party. A brush with disaster that could have obliterated his career had the news leaked. "I couldn't be myself," he once said. "Not in that system. Not at that time." So he kept playing the role, America's heartthrob by day, a man yearning for authenticity by night. As the years passed and Hollywood's fickle nature moved on, Hunter became another relic of a bygone era, almost forgotten. But Tab Hunter refused to fade away quietly. In the early 2000s, he did the unthinkable. He reclaimed his truth. In his memoir, Tab Hunter Confidential, he finally laid bare the secrets he had been forced to bury. The revelation was both heartbreaking and inspiring, shedding light on the brutal reality of a system that glorified its stars while silencing their voices. Critics praised him not just as a forgotten screen idol but as a survivor, someone who endured the suffocating mold of Hollywood's golden age and emerged, at long last, as himself. Tab Hunter was more than just a pretty face. He was a man who survived the very machine that built him up only to almost destroy him, one critic reflected. In the end, Hunter's story wasn't just about a star who had lived a lie. It was about a man who, against all odds, reclaimed his identity. But not every star gets that chance. The next figure in our story reached unimaginable fame, only to be swallowed by the darkness where the lights never shine again. Tony Curtis, the charismatic playboy who fell from grace. Tony Curtis was the embodiment of Hollywood charm, a magnetic playboy whose dazzling smile lit up the screen. With unforgettable roles in blockbusters like Some Like It Hot and Spartacus, Curtis was more than just an actor. He was an icon. His life seemed like the ultimate Hollywood fantasy, a whirlwind of fame, success, and adoration. But behind the charisma, a darker story unfolded. Curtis's insatiable hunger for the spotlight became his undoing. As his obsession with fame grew, so did his descent into a world of hedonism, wild parties, fleeting romances, and eventually, a devastating addiction. He once bragged about sleeping with hundreds of women, including the legendary Marilyn Monroe. Yet, the fleeting thrill of physical pleasure soon gave way to something far more sinister: heroin and cocaine in the turbulent 1970s. As Curtis himself once put it, "If you remember the 1970s, you haven't really lived in them." The addiction didn't just consume his body, it devoured his career. The once revered actor became abrasive and unreliable, leaving directors and producers wary. 6 failed marriages followed, along with 6 children who barely knew their father. Among them, Jamie Lee Curtis, his most famous daughter, openly acknowledged the absence of her father from her life. Yet, despite the chaos, Curtis never completely lost that trademark charm. Even in his later years, he remained a witty, self-aware storyteller, admitting, "I've turned my life into a circus. And sometimes, I forget who's running the show." His rise and fall became a cautionary tale, a reminder that the spotlight can make you shine, but it can also scorch you if you get too close. As Tony Curtis's own star flickered, another young prodigy was crumbling under the weight of fame, a child lost in the glare of success. Stay with us as we unravel the next chapter of Hollywood's tragic tales. Mickey Rooney, Hollywood's most dangerous child star. Mickey Rooney wasn't just a child star. He was the first child star to rule Hollywood. In the 1930s and 40s with the Andy Hardy films, Rooney became the most powerful name at the box office. At one point, he was the highest paid actor in America before he was even old enough to drink. But behind that bubbly exterior was a restless soul. Rooney was married 8 times to beauty queens and to stars like Ava Gardner, but none of the relationships lasted. His personal life was a chaotic series of jealousy, infidelity, and tabloid headlines. He blew millions of dollars on gambling, spending, and foolish investments. Not only that, but his own family betrayed him. In his twilight years, Rooney accused his own children of abuse and embezzlement. On set, he was an unpredictable genius. One minute he was jovial, and the next he was so hot-tempered that even directors were wary. He partied constantly, living as if failure were an inevitable part of success. "I never had a childhood. I just had a career." Mickey Rooney. He lived as if the spotlight was the only thing keeping him alive. Even in his 90s, Rooney was still taking roles, still appearing on television because if he stopped, he would have to face himself. Mickey Rooney was a symbol of old Hollywood where fame came early and the price was lifelong. He survived but never really recovered. He was a warning that child stardom is not just a dream, it can be a lifelong trap. And then, while Rooney survived with scars, our next star never had the chance to grow old. He flashed like lightning, full of desire, and disappeared before anyone could understand what was happening. James Dean. Too fast to live, too wild to die. James Dean, a name that became synonymous with rebellion, tragedy, and an untamed spirit. Though his career was brief, spanning just 3 major films, it was enough to immortalize him as a cultural icon. With his intense, brooding gaze and raw, restless energy, Dean perfectly embodied the turmoil of post-war youth. Movies like Rebel Without a Cause, East of Eden, and Giant didn't just make him a star. They etched his image into the soul of a generation grappling with identity and rebellion. He wasn't just acting. He was living the role of the misunderstood, fiery soul on and off the screen. But behind the cinematic legend was a young man fighting his own demons. Dean was drawn to speed the way a moth is drawn to flame. Motorcycles, race cars, anything that could go fast enough to chase away the chaos within him. Of all his machines, the silver Porsche Spyder, nicknamed Little Bastard, was his favorite. It wasn't just a car, it was his companion in thrill-seeking, a symbol of his defiance. Friends often feared for his life when he drove, as he tore through streets with reckless abandon, running red lights and pushing engines to their breaking point. Dean never took life slowly, he lived as if every day might be his last. In a chilling confession to a reporter, he once said, "I live as if I were going to die tomorrow, and maybe I will." That haunting statement became reality on September 30th, 1955. As the sun dipped below the California horizon, fate intervened. Dean's beloved Porsche collided head-on with another vehicle on a lonely highway, leaving the car mangled and the young star lifeless at just 24 years old. In an instant, a luminous future was extinguished, and Hollywood lost one of its brightest, most volatile talents. In the aftermath, whispers of mysteries and curses emerged. Rumors swirled about Dean's personal life, questions about his sexuality, alleged affairs with powerful studio men, and tales of a sinister curse tied to the very car that claimed his life. None of these stories were ever confirmed, yet they only deepened the enigmatic aura surrounding Dean. The ambiguity of his life and death transformed him from just a tragic figure into a myth, a rebel forever frozen in time. James Dean didn't just portray the rebel, he was the rebel. A force too intense for this world, too wild to be tamed. He lived fast, loved hard, and left before the world was ready to say goodbye. Though his act ended abruptly, his legacy endures, a symbol of youthful defiance, of living without restraint. Even decades later, his spirit continues to captivate hearts, reminding us that some souls burn too brightly to last. Warren Beatty, the untamable, charming enigma. More than just a Hollywood star, Warren Beatty was a phenomenon. A man whose presence demanded attention and whose allure was almost mythical. His rugged good looks, effortless charm, and undeniable charisma made him irresistible. But unlike most stars, Beatty never chased Hollywood. It chased him. And in his wake, he left a trail of drama, mystery, and intrigue. The legend of Warren Beatty was shaped not just by his film roles but by his notorious romantic escapades. Rumors swirled around his private life, with whispers of thousands of lovers, some say more than 12,000. From his co-stars to supermodels, even the wives of politicians, Beatty left few stones unturned. Yet, he wasn't just a womanizer, he was a master of control. On set, he was known for clashing with directors, halting production if a scene didn't sit right with him. For Beatty, perfection wasn't negotiable. While most of his relationships were fleeting, there was one exception, his 9-year partnership with Annette Bening, a surprising chapter for a man once deemed the most elusive bachelor in Hollywood. "I've never known anyone more charming or more dangerous," confessed one actress, capturing the duality that defined him. Beatty didn't just influence the movies he starred in. He shaped the very myth of Warren Beatty. Sometimes for his art, sometimes for his own ego, but always with purpose. In a world where stars often burn bright and fade fast, Beatty remained, fueled by his relentless desire for control and an insatiable need to be at the center of every room he walked into. In old Hollywood, many stars crumbled under the chaos, but few ruled it like Warren Beatty. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this glimpse into the untamed life of Warren Beatty, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories about iconic stars and their legacies. Drop a comment below with your thoughts. We'd love to hear from you. See you in the next video.